Hey everyone, this is the Electric Avenue podcast. I'm Janek. I've been working in the EV industry for about 7 years as a business development and product manager, and I'm currently based in the US. And Julius?
And I'm Julius, and I've also working in the industry for quite some years. I'm based in Munich in Germany, and together with Janek, we started Electric Avenue as a passion project, a newsletter about the latest trends and news in the e-mobility across both continents. And today you're listening to our second Electric Avenue podcast series. So we started Electric Avenue because we think that there are a lot of things ongoing, but we help you to look behind the press release and look at what is really new and what is only a copycat. And since we have been doing this as a newsletter, which does not appeal to everyone, we thought about doing it as a podcast to let you tune in while doing sports or on a drive to work or anywhere wherever you go, and get the latest insights directly into your earpods.
Yeah, and this is going to be kind of a catch-up episode because it's been a few weeks since Julius and I spoke because of Thanksgiving holidays here in the US and travel and sickness. So yeah, I think the last time we spoke was around the week before Thanksgiving, which was LA Auto Show, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
you
so
have been visiting the LA Auto Show.
yeah, I went up there. It's been, I think, the third time I went to the LA Auto Show, and it kind of gets smaller every time I go. I think auto shows are sort of a dying thing in the industry. Yeah, especially after COVID.
It's true. And I think they a little bit they try to transform, comparing that, for example, to IAA in Munich. Many exhibitors try to not only look at cars anymore, but mobility in general. But is it the same in the US on the LA Auto Show?
No, it's really all about cars. Honda had this little scooter there that you can sit on and drive, but that was the only real micromobility thing. Everything else was like SUVs, pickup trucks.
Okay, and is it about electric cars, or is it still about more horsepowers, bigger motors, bigger cars?
It's a little bit about electric cars, but not as much as they used to be, because I think back in like 2018-19 there was some pretty big EV premieres at the LA Auto Show. Like Rivian first presented its pickup truck at the LA Auto Show, and a lot of the European manufacturers chose LA to launch some of their EVs because California was seen as this like very EV forward place. This year there were no German manufacturers except Volkswagen. So Audi didn't have a booth, Mercedes didn't have a booth, BMW didn't have a booth, and Porsche didn't have a booth. It was just Volkswagen. And then it was the American manufacturers, but some of them only in like very small, had only a very small presence. And then it was kind of the Japanese ones, but they're more lagging in terms of EVs. Yeah, and Hyundai Kia were there as well. But the kind of star of the show was Lucid, which presented the Gravity electric SUV, its second car. So that was the only real world premiere at the show, and that certainly drew the biggest crowds from media and industry attendees.
Did you get the chance to also catch up with former colleagues and also have an in-depth look at the vehicle and also, of course, the charging capabilities?
Yeah. There were a lot of people from Lucid there, a lot of my former colleagues. I actually had never seen the final exterior design of the car while I was working at Lucid because there were different iterations of it. But I thought it looked really good in person. I thought it's a really good design. The charging capabilities, I think they didn't say anything publicly about those, but it's mostly the same platform as the Air from what I understand. So probably similar charging capabilities. So high voltage, probably up to 350 kilowatt charging rate.
Did it already have an ACS connector, or is it the CCS one from North America?
I don't remember if they even opened the charge port, but
Okay.
yeah.
I think that must have been a hard thing to swallow for Peter Rawlinson. That rivalry with Tesla. I think there was even a tweet from Musk about that.
Yeah. Peter has a little bit of a rivalry with Elon. And so when Lucid announced NACS, it was later than some of the other companies in the industry. And I think, Elon teased the company a little bit in a tweet saying this must have been a hard pill to swallow. So, yeah.
Yes. What was about the vehicle? Anything that surprised you that you haven't known of, or that the publicity hasn't, the public audience hasn't known of?
I thought the starting price was interesting, and they said it's going to start at under 80K, which is kind of where the Rivian truck and a lot of competitors start too. So it was lower than I expected. Yeah, I mean, the car looks really nice. They redid the infotainment system a little bit. I think it's an upgrade from the Air too. Yeah, those were the main things I noticed.
I noticed the big frunk in the front, where they even deliver let's say a bench that you can easily and comfortable sit in the frunk, which is quite interesting. I'm not sure if that is a real use case. Maybe school mom or dad picking up their kids and waiting sitting in the front, sunny California. That might be a use case.
Yeah, the one that I could see is maybe you're like camping somewhere where there's no benches and you didn't bring like foldable chairs.
Or at the charging break.
Yeah, or at the charging break, if there's like no benches around, but you want to like sit outside, you could use that. Yeah,
You're waiting, and then power the limited power Electrify America station charging takes a little bit longer.
at a D-rated station, yeah, you might want to sit
D-rated
down
station.
outside somewhere. Yeah. Yeah, but other than that, there wasn't too much exciting this year that I noticed.
Was there any, let's say, charging specific parts of the booth and any automotive manufacturer?
Usually they had some displays of like home charging stations, which are mostly just white labeled units from different companies, but not much information around it. I did play around a little bit with the Cadillac, I think it's the Lyric infotainment system, which runs Google Automotive Services. So you have things like Google Maps.
In, or
yeah, it's Google built in. So you have things like Google Maps, Google Assistant, Google Play Store running on the head unit. And I had only seen that implementation in Volvo and Polestar cars before. And this was, honestly pretty similar. The one thing I did notice is that when I played around with Google Maps and searched for charging stations around me, I noticed that GM cars apparently don't have access to the live status of Electrify America stations. They only have it for EVgo and ChargePoint, which is probably because they don't have any contractual agreement in place currently with Electrify America. But I thought that was interesting.
That maybe for the audience also important to know. We always look at the charging, but charging usually also starts from within the car, from within the navigation system, and therefore we also always look at the charging interface that you get with the map view, for example. And honestly, we have seen a lot of bad implementations during the last years. It got better, but the sheer change that Google built in could bring to the user experience and harmonizing that view among many brands, that could change the industry dramatically. And certainly when it comes to charging and making the choice in the end for the customer to navigate the EV driver to a perfectly suited charging station, somebody who could do this really well is Google, with also gathering the data across many different vehicles aggregating user preference already today in different aspects of our life, they have, I think they can make a tremendous impact or change also to the industry.
Yeah. Yeah. So for those that don't know, Google built-in is basically Google's branding around running a version of its services and the Android operating system on the infotainment head unit in cars. I think the first car to launch with that was the Polestar 2 a couple of years ago. But it's coming to more and more cars. So most of the modern General Motors cars are going to launch with that, from like the Hummer brand, the Cadillac brand, the Chevrolet brand, the Buick brand. Renault, I think, is launching EVs with it.
Yep.
Polestar and Volvo, obviously. Anyone else that you know?
Not from the top of my head, but also to kind of emphasize that it's really important to differentiate between, for example, Google CarPlay or Apple CarPlay that we're using. Google Car and
Google
Apple
Auto. No, Android Auto.
I'm always confusing the names because also they're changing the names, as you can hear. Maybe it used to be Google Automotive Services, now it's Google Built-in. But the big difference here is that it's really not running on your phone anymore, which you plug in and then your phone apps are mirrored to the vehicle. It's natively running on the computer, which is in the vehicle. And for me, for example, I'm personally an iPhone user. I've test driven the Polestar 2, which is really good. And it was back in 2019, I think. It was, as mentioned, the first version of Google Built-in. And it was really convenient. And that would also be it would come to a point where I wouldn't use my phone anymore for running then a navigation service, but use what is given from within the car. I think many manufacturers have catched up, especially in the premium segment since then. So, for example, I tested also BMW, new navigation system. I think the OS operating system 8. Also, Mercedes does a better job nowadays with e-routing. But in the beginning, it was really crappy from all manufacturers. And people relied on third-party services, apps like a better route planner. Later, it was also Pump and a bunch of other applications.
Yeah, and I think Tesla also uses Google Maps in its navigation system, but just for like maps and point of interests, all the routing algorithm and stuff like that is separate from the official Google one.
But I think they use at least the real-time traffic data. I could imagine, because I just on a weekend tested it side by side, Google Maps versus the Tesla navigation system. And it routed us through the exact same route because there was a blockage on the highway. So we need to leave the highway and were rerouted.
Nice. Yeah. I just know that in the cars that are like official Google built-in cars, you can also log in with your Google account on the device. And then you have all your, all the links between your different Google services. Like if you have a Google Calendar appointment with an address in it, your car in Google Maps can automatically suggest that as a destination when you get in, and all those things that are very convenient for a lot of people. You can't do that in a car like Tesla, even though it uses Google Maps on the back end. Another thing I just remembered, I think there were 2 deals announced between Mercedes and Porsche and Google to get Google services and Google Maps. I don't think that has launched yet. But I think they're also going to be a little bit different because I think Mercedes and Porsche are trying to have more influence over what Google Maps looks like in their vehicles. So,
but do you know the difference then between what is Tesla using today from getting from Google Maps versus what Mercedes or Porsche are getting?
I think they're trying to get something in the middle between what Volvo has and what Tesla has, where you still get the App Store and Google Assistant, but it doesn't look the same between a Mercedes car and a GM car. They want more control over the front end. That was my understanding from the press release, but I'm curious what it'll actually look like when it launches.
Coming back to the LA Auto Show, anything else that you have noted during your visit that is
No,
worth sharing?
I think
No.
that was it. Yeah.
Then I think from then you did some visits to charging hubs, and personally I also visited a charging hub opening. Let's start in the US. I think you looked at 2 car manufacturers' charging networks. Tell us a little bit. What have you seen? Maybe again, before we deep dive into the topic, why is that of an interest? During the last years, we have seen several car manufacturers announcing their plans to build own charging networks. So what previously was only offered by Tesla, when they famously, we all know, Tesla started the Supercharging network because there weren't any charging stations. So you couldn't take electric vehicle for long drive. So they had to build that. But during the last years, many car manufacturers, even so there are other networks in Europe, but also in the US, which customers can use, they still said we're going down that path and build our own networks, either as joint ventures. There's, for example, in Europe, Ionity is a charging network joint venture founded originally by, I think, BMW, Mercedes, Ford, VW Group with Audi and Porsche. And did I miss one? I think later Hyundai, Kia joined.
Yeah, in the beginning was Ford, BMW, Mercedes, and Volkswagen Group, and then Hyundai, Kia came in.
And those joint ventures, we have seen that also. We are now seeing really one OEM building their own charging network. And more specifically, we have Rivian, I think, in the US that built the Rivian Adventure Network that you visited.
Yep. So Rivian is trying to follow in Tesla's footsteps here a little bit, and their rationale for it was mainly that Rivian vehicles are used differently than Tesla vehicles in the sense that they're really meant to be like explorer vehicles that go off-road to different national parks. You camp out in the wild. So they said we need fast charging hubs that are not just along the major interstate highways that connect big cities in the US, but also that go into these certain destinations like Sequoia National Park or Yosemite National Park. And over the Thanksgiving break, I was up actually near Sequoia National Forest in a town called Yokern, California. And that is where Rivian has built one of its early, I think, fast charging sites for its network. Let me see if I can find some pictures. So Rivian, interestingly, didn't just build the network themselves, they also built the chargers themselves. So they have a custom DC charger that they developed.
And how is that different to other?
So the main thing that's different is the exterior design. It still uses the CCS connector, like the Rivian vehicles. But I believe the way it works, I'm not sure how many kilowatts a power cabinet has. It's like between 200 and 300 kilowatts, I think. And they're shared with up to 3 dispensers.
So these are only dispensers that we see in the picture.
Yeah.
And they share then the power units somewhere in the back.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you see this? This is the power unit.
Yes.
And they even have some stalls that are pull through. So if you're like pulling a trailer or something like that, and they're right next to a Tesla Supercharger, actually.
It will be interesting if is the Rivian on the 400 volt or 800 volt architecture?
It's 400 volt architecture, so yeah, I think the maximum it can get is like 200, 210 kilowatts or something like that out of these chargers.
Okay. So no difference compared to the Tesla supercharging units when it comes to current power capabilities.
Yeah. They even had some AC chargers at that site as well. These are open to all electric cars and they're free, but the DC chargers are at the moment exclusive to Rivians. And they were free for a while. They just started charging in November. So this this site already had pricing. I believe it was 36 cents a kilowatt hour. And that's also a difference that they have to Tesla Superchargers is these units do have a display to display pricing information and stuff like that.
Okay. And how is it priced compared to, for example, Tesla? If you can see here, directly located at the same location.
It was very similar. I think Tesla was 35 cents a kilowatt hour and Rivian was 36.
Okay. Are they equipped with besides we've seen the screen? Are they having credit card readers, which Tesla in the US, at least at the V3, didn't have yet?
I don't think they do. Yeah, I don't think I saw any credit card readers on them. Yeah,
I guess okay. If the chargers are only available for Rivian customers, I guess they will use a amended version of AutoCharge, where the car.
Yeah, I think the
Yes.
Rivian management has said that they will open the network up to other brands in the future. And if they want to get NEVI funds for future sites that they open up to other cars, they will have to implement card readers, I think. Same goes for Tesla. So maybe they have a future hardware iteration of this charger that does have card readers.
Let's say goal that we set or assumed back when we also wrote about why OEMs maybe should build and operate charging stations was that it's sort of a test bed that they can ensure compatibility between charging stations and their cars. How is the perception of the Rivian network among Rivian users? Do you have any first-hand insights?
I think pretty good. I know a lot of people that drive Rivians or like YouTubers that have them and really like them. So I haven't heard any complaints about the Rivian network. This plug share rating for this site is also a 10 out of 10.
Okay.
So people seem pretty happy with these.
Nice.
Same goes for the supercharger next to it, 10 out of 10.
Full score, high score.
At Yokon Airport, an old BTC unit, that's a 3.2 out of 10. And under repair.
And under repair, I think that those fat boys are also well known for not always being the operationally best performant units.
Yeah. And then on that note, there's another OEM owned or co-owned network which recently launched in the US, which is General Motors had announced that they're building more of a highway fast charging network under the GM Energy label. And that's in cooperation with a site host called Pilot or Flying J. So they have pretty big highway rest stops across the US that often also include big truck rest stops for truck drivers where they can refuel their diesel and stuff like that. And they're building these very modern charging sites with a lot of them, I think, have pull-through stalls and canopies, co-branded with GM. And they announced that the first 17 sites are now live, and the sites are actually built and operated by EVgo, but white labeled to GM Energy. So
for
this
the ones
is kind of an interest.
Maybe the ones that don't know EVgo is among one of the, I think, top 4-5-ish fast charging operators today already. So they own and operate charging stations, and here they are serving as what is the role in the joint venture exactly?
I think they're a hardware and software provider. So this charging station right here in the picture is a Delta charging station, which is a Taiwanese manufacturer that EVgo uses. So I think they provide the chargers, they probably build the sites, and they provide the software backend that operates the chargers.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
but
I guess also the operational hard work is that not done here probably by GM or Pilot, but I guess then also the fleet, the field service, the maintenance guys are directed and brought into by EVgo because
that's what I would
of the synergies.
Yeah. It's kind of a lot of companies and brands I mean, it's good to have multiple companies cooperate, but I think the branding is a little confusing because on this charger alone, you see at the top there's the GM Energy brand. Then there's the two brands of this rest stop chain, Pilot and Flying J. Then at the bottom it says powered by EVgo. So now if my car doesn't work with this charger, who do I call? Like,
it's always the same, and then you have the finger pointing game.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
if I call them at the GM hotline, they're going to say, please call EVgo. And then the same if I call the Pilot Flying J hotline. But,
all I like first, once it's about putting up their logo and making the branding look nice and clean, especially in the launch. But once it's operational, who's going to take the customer's call? Who's going to educate the customer how is charging working at their stations, and who's taking also the blame once it's not working? It's always the same, I have the feeling.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so another thing they announced is that you can find those sites. If I remember correctly, you can find them in the EVgo app, in the GM apps for the specific cars, and Pilot Flying J also has their own fuel rewards app where you can also find those sites. So yeah, you have a lot of different entry points which lead to potentially calling different hotlines when there's an issue, which then needs warm transfers between one hotline to another hotline that can actually help the driver. So yeah, we'll see how seamless this all gets implemented.
Let's maybe have a quick look at back to the layout. What I like really is that they took the charging customer journey one step further. Are all locations equipped, for example, with the rooftop that protects the drivers from rain and sun during charging? I know that those installations are not cheap. You also need additional building permits in many countries, and also the costs for installing such a site are much higher.
I don't think it's all of them. I think someone did the research on LinkedIn and they said 35% of the stations that are built have a canopy. So about a third of the 17 locations.
Are they also building charging bays right under the existing fueling networks and the roofs? So maybe even deconstruct fueling pumps?
I don't know. I'm not sure. I know some networks in Europe, I think, did that, right?
I think in Norway, they started, like Circle K reported that fueling stations are, let's say, decommissioned because of low usage. But I think they are always a little bit further ahead. Yeah, but at some point you have infrastructure which is not used anymore at that scale that it used to be. And you still, like, every pump needs to be maintained per year. Probably have also some validation that they're still delivering what is sold to the customers. Or sometimes a truck crashes against the fueling station or a passenger vehicle, and then they are broken. Anything can happen that we can't even imagine of.
Yeah. Another interesting thing to note is they said they will plan to introduce exclusive benefits for GM drivers, like the ability to reserve a charger. That's something that we've also seen from networks like the Mercedes charging network. It's not live yet, but it is announced in the press release they did when they launched the first 17 sites. And yeah, we haven't seen that from Rivian yet, but I assume once they open their network, it's something that they're probably taking a look at as well if they want to create a half exclusivity through providing reservation function to their drivers.
Yeah, reservation. You just mentioned the first one that made a big press release about it and launched, Mercedes. And I also had the chance to visit the opening of their first charging hub in Europe. I think 2 weeks earlier, they opened already the first hub in the US. And meanwhile, they are also working on opening one or several in China. Let me also share some impressions from it.
Yeah, I'm curious how that was, because I know you went to the official opening ceremony in Mannheim. And I
Yeah.
think there was some people from Mercedes that were available to
Yes.
ask them questions.
So maybe first-hand pictures. How is that first side looking?
It's
What I
looking great,
really it's looking great. It's I
including
think
the
it's not the
sky.
best time to open a charging hub in Germany during that
Yeah,
time of the year. But honestly, that's timing.
yeah. But it looks, I mean, the hub looks great. Um,
Yeah,
I notice very unified branding. It's only one brand.
one brand only.
Yeah,
I think they do operate. So they're not doing everything by themselves. To be clear, so
yeah.
Mercedes is really the commercial operator and owner of those charging stations. Though this hub, for example, was it's called Niederlassung. It's like the retail location of Mercedes by themselves in Mannheim in Germany.
It's
And
basically a dealership, but it's not independently owned. It's owned by the corporation, which is
correct.
legal in Germany, but not in the US, for example, I think.
Also interesting. And I think that eased
Or
also a
in
little bit
certain states, at least in the US, yeah.
okay. And I think that also eased for them the lead time because they basically converted original parking spots for, I guess, employees to
Hmm.
this new hub.
Yeah.
But the location is quite good because it's like directly in front of the city, but close to the highway. So
Hmm.
I think for Mercedes drivers or also others, it might be worthwhile to exit the highway and go to that hub.
Yeah.
And then you
And
have,
it's just in the
yeah,
middle between basically Stuttgart and Frankfurt, which are two major
yeah,
cities. So it's about halfway, and you can take a stop there and have a break.
yeah. And also many people get their car, for example, at that location. So
Mm.
they basically can do also educational instructions for people who get their first electric vehicle because they
Mm.
have this nice looking hub in front of their door. And you can
Yeah.
actually also, as a non-Mercedes driver, take that or go to that location and charge your electric vehicle. So they are integrated in your roaming, so different providers, also other OEMs services, and they also have the credit cards. So everybody is free to go there and charge, and then also visit the on-site location services, which have quite long open times for Germany. It's I think until 10 in the evening, and
That's
the
the
location is accessible
dealership, or do
24/7.
they have a lounge, like a
They,
specific
they
lounge
they
like
have
they
a
have in Atlanta?
in Atlanta, I think they have the box with the launch, and
Yeah.
here you need to go into the dealership. But
Okay.
they said that's open and everybody can go use the toilets, get a coffee. So
Okay.
I think it's also a way to facilitate or strengthen your brand awareness because basically they also said you could sign a leasing contract and that 5 minutes charging breaks.
Yeah, or do a test drive, right? If you're a BMW customer that's stopping there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe about the site. So this big wall that you see in the back, that was just for the press release photos to lighten up, I
Hmm.
think, a little bit.
Hmm.
But still, the roof is the whole station is having a minimalistic design, which is I think quite nice. And you
Hmm.
have these little like it should be stars, sort of the lightning, which think we also saw at the GM location, which I think is also convenient because during night it makes you feel maybe a little bit more secure and more attractive to go charging there. And what is new? Yeah.
One question. I saw in one of the videos from the US side that if you drive into a charging spot, the lights above you actually light up and get brighter when they notice that there's a car there. Did you notice that on the German side as well?
Since there was travel all the time, I didn't notice that. But I've
Mm.
seen that at other operators already. For
Okay.
example, at Fastnet, they also have these iconic roofs, and
Hmm.
those lights always go brighter if you with your car enter. I think it's
Nice.
quite smart.
Yeah.
Saves some energy and still gives the convenience.
Yeah.
Yeah, on lighting, because we talk already, you can see here these light bars. on the pillars, and they are also quite an interesting innovation, I think, because they indicate the availability of a charging station. So you have like a traffic light system. So you have green once the station is free and available. You have blue if it's reserved. So that's quite nice integration that we can illustrate a little bit what they did there. Then you have this orange reddish, which indicates that the station is out of service, that you hopefully never see. And which I think one more thing that is quite easy to implement, but not everybody is doing that. They do quite an easy to see numbering. You see here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And that is also quite handy if you have added features like the reservation, where you need to be guided to a certain way. It's easier if you're guided to a certain stall of a charging station and you can see it already from the car, or if you also want to do a remote start from the car of the charging station.
Yeah, and I see even the charger themselves has a little number on the top right. So it's very much like how you would say at a gas station when you go inside to pay, I'm at pump number 3 or something like that, right? So it feels very familiar.
You can't pay with cash, I have to say. If maybe some German listeners are hoping to pay with cash, not possible.
Yeah, I'm just saying, like in the early days, you would go to a charging station and you would try to find the identification number for a charger, and it was something cryptic, right? It was like, I don't know, EN-13ZQ, and you're like, okay.
And it's even still today, like there are charging stations which you can't use, for example, the RFID card or a credit card. You can only use it with the app, but it's still like really small, printed somewhere below the connector, and then basically you need to phone already to type that in or scan a QR code, but then you also need it to make light when it's dark. It's such a bad user experience in my opinion. I mean, Mercedes is also not doing everything by themselves here. They announced those chargers from IPtronic, quite well-known charging station hardware manufacturer in Europe, from Italy.
Are those the 400 kilowatt units already?
No, it's still the 300 kilowatt units, but with one connector only. So every station is having only one connector. So a driver would have the full 300 kilowatt from that charging station available without power sharing.
A lot of wasted resources.
They do have a side level, or on a side level, they have an energy management. So they don't have the theoretical 1.8 megawatt grid
connection is optimized a little bit, but then you still often have power modules in these chargers that are not used when there's low voltage cars charging there, right?
Correct. But they also saw, I have had an interview and also some talks with the implementation team on site, and they are not fixed on that concept, they told me. So I think they just started with that layout, and based on the numbers, they will probably also, or maybe modify that. So it's not something that is set in stone.
So who's the who provides the cloud backend, the sort of technical charge point operator for this site?
It's E.ON Drive, and for the industry insiders, they know that it's also not E.ON Drive who is developing and owning an own backend. I guess it's still Virta, as far as I know. It's a Finnish charge point management system provider, but here it's on I think E.ON is doing the big implementation partner here. They are also co-responsible for the whole construction and the operation of the chargers. I'm not sure who's doing what exactly. Certainly, I guess because E.ON is a big German utility, they will probably provide the energy for the chargers. And I think they have also big parts of the installation and operation stake here. But it's important Mercedes is really being the operator in terms of who sets the price, who's also kind of commercially responsible. If it's a profit or loss, that's on their duty.
Okay, got it. Yeah, I remember years ago, Eon made a big investment in Verta.
Yeah.
So it would make sense that they still use their backend.
Yeah, it's quite interesting because there are other utilities in Germany that back in the days went down the path of building their own charge point management system. I hope not too many are going to do this again, because they are now, for the ones who have been reading our Electric Avenue article, know that we are a fan of open source software systems. And we also think that, I mean, basically, if we talk to people in the industry, what are the differences between the charge point management systems? It's so small, and everybody is kind of reinventing the wheel there. A lot of resources getting lost.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe an update on that. A couple of weeks ago, we wrote about Citrine OS, which is an open source OCPP 2.0.1 charge point management system. They are now an official project of the Linux Foundation Energy. So they got accepted into that. So now basically the governance around that will be managed by the Linux Foundation, which kind of makes it a more trusted brand and ensures other companies that want to join the project or contribute to it that they can do so on neutral grounds.
Yeah, I think quite an important step to be kind of getting more credibility to it, and hopefully also getting a community behind it, because it's not the intention that the company, even so it's initiated by, for example, a company, that this company is in the end driving all the implementation work. Ideally, it's co-implementation between multiple stakeholders, and also not only companies, but for example, universities or any research institutes that are helping drive or developing the industry, making things
Exactly. The
better.
idea is to distribute the load among many shoulders, and then in the end, still end up with a common implementation that is very interoperable.
Yeah. Here maybe quite an interesting vehicle that we also got to see in live, the EQXX. It's a concept car, but unfortunately you can see it's a green light, so they didn't plug it in. It would be interesting on what voltage and what charging power the vehicle is capable of, because I think it's not only rumors anymore, but the new CLA from Mercedes, they confirmed on the IAA in Munich that it's running on 800 volt. So I guess that the concept car might also have the platform integrated already.
Yeah. It's a good looking car.
Yeah.
Cool. Anything else from the Mercedes side?
Yeah, I think the biggest feature that they announced, but unfortunately I wasn't able to test it, but there are nice videos about it, is the reservation. So one exclusive functionality that Mercedes drivers are going to enjoy is the reservation functionality. And I also talked to the team that implemented that functionality or developed the customer journey behind it. And I think they made things good. Honestly, I wasn't a big fan of reservation. I'm not sure what's your opinion about it.
Yeah, I'm also skeptical. I think you need to. It's a very delicate balance to implement it for only one brand in a multiple brand network. There's a lot of potential to create confusion with people arriving and not expecting a station to be reserved. But yeah, I'm curious what you thought of Mercedes's implementation of that.
Let me give you some insights how it works. And for that, I will quickly share our newsletter where we also describe that in more detail, but it has also some pictures included that makes it, I think, easier to understand. So first step, it's not a functionality that the user will trigger manually. And I think this is important because you don't want to reserve a charging station during driving. This distracts you. It's just going to be a hassle, and you will forget about it. You do it too late, and then you don't have actually what you want to achieve. Because what you want to achieve is that people are not, or having confidence that once they arrive at the charging station, that there is a spot available for them and they can charge and don't need to wait. Because we are talking here about premium to luxury cars. People want to have comfort and confidence. So what is happening behind the scenes is that the car, based on the route, is having the trigger point when to reserve a charging station and what charging station is to be reserved. So now they implemented the Mercedes network, which makes sense because they can also control what is happening on the back end with the chargers, or at least have a stake in it and a saying. But potentially that could also work at any other charging stations. They didn't announce that they will do it, but it would work. So the car is having a route calculated, and then once a Mercedes station is among the route and suitable because of arrival time with estimated state of charge, they will reserve a charge point 15 minutes before arrival. And I think this is also quite smart because it would not block a charging station for hours, which other implementations would do if the customer reserves a charging station before starting their drive, which is then a waste of resource because nobody would be able to charge during that time.
Will they prefer Mercedes stations in the routing algorithm? Did they say?
They didn't say that, but if I would be Mercedes, I would try to create awareness about this from their customers.
Right.
But I think it needs to be balanced. So if the detour is getting too long, people will lose trust in the navigation system.
Right. Yeah, it's just it would make sense for them to do it, but it requires customization of the routing algorithm, which for different, depending what car manufacturer you are and who you buy your routing product from, or if you make it in-house, is a bigger or smaller effort.
Yeah. I haven't tested that in that details. They could have done it already because they have the stake, as we mentioned, in Ionity. So it would also make sense because they invested into it, that they drive traffic to it. But honestly, I don't know.
I think you and I have worked with car companies for so many years that we are a little scarred. And anytime a car manufacturer has to make a software change on the infotainment, we're like, oh, is that ever going to happen?
Quick break. Mein Kopfhörer sind gerade weggegangen.
Ah, okay.
Hörst du mich wieder?
Ja, ich habe dich die ganze Zeit gehört.
Okay, irgendwer hat sich mit meinem Kopfhörer... Okay, nee, Setup passt wieder. So, ich schneide das dann raus.
Okay.
Willst du nochmal bestarten bei deine persönlichen oder unsere Erfahrungen zu Car Companies?
Okay.
3, 2, 1.
Yeah, I think because you and I have worked in this industry with car companies for the past couple of years, we have some scars, some battle scars sometimes, because it takes a long time, and sometimes it doesn't happen at all, that car companies make changes to the infotainment system. It's often an uphill battle. So
yeah. And what you also need to be aware of, that those teams responsible for charging are not the ones that work on the navigation system. So for the user, it must be one product in the end, but behind the scenes, multiple teams are involved to make those things happen. And rarely the charging teams have the influence in saying what is going to happen in the navigation system specifically. They maybe have their subset of screens that they are responsible for in charging, but certainly not the end-to-end customer journey.
Yeah. Definitely keep an eye on this, but also I think applaud Mercedes for already having this implemented with the launch of the US side.
Yeah, and that brings me to the point, we didn't see that in Germany, and I couldn't test that. They promised me, if you're listening, come back to me once you have it available in Germany. So I guess that it's here the dependency to E.ON and the charge point management system, why it's not live yet. They didn't say about that, but I assume it because in other videos from the US, the functionality is already working. So what you can see here.
Yeah. One thought I have on this is like the automatic reservation is cool, but it's also very rigid, right? If you're driving a longer distance, the car does the calculation of the perfect charging spots and then wants to do reservations for you. But maybe you don't want to stop there. Maybe you want to stop 10 minutes earlier because you have to pee, or you want to drive a little bit longer because you're not hungry yet. Then this user journey kind of breaks, right?
Yes. And I think that's a general thing that people need to be aware of. Like, it used to be a problem to find a charging station, but nowadays, at least in some areas, countries, the infrastructure is well built. So there's multiple options how to choose from them.
Yeah, this feels like it's still addressing a little bit the last generation's concerns around charging, which is like, can I even get from A to B at all? And I can probably only get there if I stop at exactly these spots because there's no alternatives.
Yeah.
But I think what we're eventually going to get to is that, like gas stations today, every 20 kilometers or so, there's a spot where you can leave the highway and stop and eat and use the toilet and charge. And then it's going to be a lot less rigid. But obviously there are ways that you can evolve this system that still work with that user experience.
Yeah.
So right now it's a little rigid.
Little personal experience report on that one, because for the ones that read it, I've done a long road trip, 4,000 kilometers across Europe with a Tesla Model Y in the summer. And I personally had that pain because usually the route is really good from Tesla, but it's the brakes are too far away sometimes. You need to, or you want to take a break to get some rest. And then there's really a break in the customer journey. And also Tesla is not addressing that really well, in my opinion, because then it's really about what is my next closest, most suitable charging location that fulfills some minimum criteria. I always say like, okay, it needs to have at least 4 charge points because that gives some or it prevents some reliability issues of a single charge point. And then of course, availability and the detour that you will take. And I haven't seen good solutions yet in the market that solve this issue of easily, while driving, finding the next possible charging location.
Right. Because in theory, you can click around on the screen with a Tesla and manually search the superchargers in a radius around you and then manually add one to the route so that it reroutes. But it's so many clicks, it's so much like activity that is distracting that it's not a great experience.
And I can only, or mostly I can see the Tesla Superchargers only in Tesla vehicles. And it's not, it's also their network has some, let's say, white grayish spots. And then maybe third-party operators would be better suitable for my need as a driver.
In Europe, Tesla already shows other networks in the navigation system.
Yeah, but the data is, so first of all, there's no dynamic data about if a charger is available or occupied. And they have, I think, a logic where they only display it if there were successful charging sessions during the last months. But I feel that this logic hinders the updates of static data in the car, or maybe also their data providers are not giving them the most updated data, because really good locations.
Because they're looking at from successful sessions by Tesla cars, right? So it's like a chicken or egg problem. If you don't show them, there's not going to be successful sessions, and if there's no sessions, you don't show them.
Exactly. So I have multiple charging locations that I went to that didn't show, and they were really nice, like Electra in France, 20 charge points, and the roof, everything really nice, directly at the highway. Wasn't in the car. I only find
maybe that's their strategy. They want nerds like you to go there that know they exist have successful sessions and then they get added.
Getting on adventures and
Yeah, basically using the early adopters. Yeah, like explorers. You go through the jungle with the machete and try to find the treasures, and then they add the data.
But really an important point, like, are OEMs really sharing the data about successful charging sessions among players, like other car manufacturers? No, they don't. Are they sharing it to charge point operators? No, they don't. And I think this is
No.
something that also hinders progress sometimes in the industry.
Yeah, agreed.
Maybe back to the charging journey with a reservation. So once the car reserved charge point 15 minutes before arrival, you also get a banner notification that a charge point has been reserved at the next charging stop, which is, I think, quite neat. It's simple, banner, easy to understand. It doesn't distract you too much. It disappears automatically, or you click on the X and it's automatically confirmed. And at that point, you will also not be charged for a reservation. So it doesn't cost you any money.
Yep.
And upon arrival at the charging hub, the car also shows you what charge point is reserved for you, but you actually don't need to go to that dedicated charge point. So you could also go to any other charge point and authenticate a charging session. And this will automatically release the reservation of the dedicated charge point within seconds. And I think this is also quite nice. And also with the light bar that you saw in the other pictures, it indicates for you it's this orange. It was orange light for, I think it was orange for reserved, red reserved.
And let's say there are two reserved and they're both showing the yellow color for reserved. Does the infotainment tell me which number I'm supposed to go to?
Yes, it does. Unfortunately, I can make it bigger. No, that's the video from Kyle from Out of Spec. So yeah, the infotainment does show you the charge point number, which one is reserved. And you also, as seen on the picture, it's easy to see that with the big numbering, which one is reserved for you.
Yeah, cool.
And I think you have in total 10 minutes buffer time. So if you have, for example, a little bit of traffic jam, or you miss the drive-in location, so in total you have 25 minutes to get to your dedicated and reserved charge point.
Okay. And could there be a scenario where I'm driving a BMW and I'm showing up there and there are 6 spots and they're all reserved currently by Mercedes drivers?
No, that is also something that I have had a concern of, so that in peak times, you will create basically exclusivity for Mercedes drivers. And they prevented that because they have on a site level percentage of locations that can be reserved. So not 100% of locations can be reserved at all time. That means it's for non-Mercedes drivers, but also for Mercedes drivers that show up without a reservation, that they can still charge. And I think this makes also sense because essentially you as a charge point operator would harm your utilization because those reservation times, there wouldn't be any charging sessions. But with this threshold, they kind of avoid that problem. Yeah, I think
I have to say this seems pretty well thought out, and I think it's a cool innovation from Mercedes because we haven't really seen any other car manufacturer launch a well thought out public charging reservation product.
Yeah, I used to, or there was a not so marketed pilot from BMW. They also did it with from within the car, but it was way simpler. We used to work on that one, and they worked with any charge point operator that has had that functionality. But usually the big problem was that the customer experience at the site for the customers that didn't reserve was really not thought out. And charge point operators wanted to charge for those reservation times. And
Mm-hmm.
if you have a bad experience because you reserve and then you come up to the charger and that's blocked either by a combustion vehicle or an electric vehicle, and you pay for that reservation, it was horrible, honestly.
Yeah, it was too early, right? Because
Yeah,
it needs to be thought about from the beginning. The moment you put the site design in place, that you have this function, you can't just throw it on to a site like a legacy site.
yeah. Especially also AC, it's really crappy because there you rarely have good visible screens located on street. Really not good.
Yeah, cool. What else happened? I think there's quite some news from the Tesla side in Europe with the Supercharger network. So I think you went to a site and you checked it out yourself that has a V4 supercharger.
Yes, was not the first site in Germany with a V4, but the first one in Munich that was easy to reach for me. Maybe not all the best pictures because the lighting was really bad. It was in the evening. You can see it's located in a parking garage in the city of Munich. So it's really in an urban area, which is rather new. Usually we have seen Tesla sites in Europe along the highways, but really now they're starting to get into the urban areas, which also makes sense because at least in Germany, you have many times not a private parking spot for your car, or you live in a rather older building, which not easy if you're, for example, paying rent to get a charging station installed in there because either grid capacity is not there, not enough space, or sometimes you own the apartment, but you need to have consents among all the owners. So for those people that get an EV, they need to rely on public charging. I think
And who owns this parking garage? Is it the city? Is it a supermarket?
I think it's private property. So it's probably some real estate company. Among or at the location itself, there's also, for example, a Rewe, a supermarket, which is, I think, separate business that is also renting out the space there. And this
Got it.
parking garage can be used by anyone. So it could also be close by offices.
Do you have to pay for parking on top of charging?
It was there wasn't any barrier to enter where you need to pay for it. There might be a time restriction with which you indicate we are like a clock where you arrive in, and only with a special permit you can park longer. But I'm not sure about it. Good question. Yeah, what is special about the V4? You can also already see a small i3, and compared to the Soul, the stallers are way higher, so much bigger. And with the longer stalls, they also introduced longer cables, which was one of the big pain points for non-Tesla drivers that charge at Tesla Superchargers. Because in Europe, it has been opened for this year already, I think this summer, and also in the US, it has been opened for non-Tesla drivers, the Supercharging network. Have you driven to Supercharger site in the US?
Yeah, I've been to one that was public in Scotts Valley, which was the closest one to Silicon Valley. And yeah, that was just a classic V3 supercharger, I think. And I charged with my Kia Niro EV, and the cable was a little bit short, but it was okay because the Niro has the charge port at the front of the car.
Okay.
So I could drive into the parking spot front facing the charger, and then cable was okay. Yeah, so that was my experience. But there's still very few sites in the US that are publicly accessible. I think in the beginning it was only 3. My feeling is it's around 10 or so now.
Okay.
Still quite a low number.
Yeah, I think that
And other OEMs that have signed agreements with Tesla in the US are only supposed to get access in early 2024. So companies like Ford and GM.
Yeah, I think the big pain point here and why it's slower in the US compared to Europe is that in Europe, Tesla has been using CCS2 for their cars and their charging stations for a long time. That means that every site in Europe is equipped with CCS2. Thereby, it's no hardware update, at least from what I see or what I can see at the charging locations, compared to the US, where you need to have these magic docks installed, which means there needs to be somebody goes to the site, install these magic docks, and only then they can be opened.
Explain what CCS2 is.
CCS2 is the combined charging system, which is the same or quite similar to CCS1, combined charging system in the US. CCS is always for direct current, so fast charging. And there are small differences. For example, in the US, there is a leash.
But it's basically the plug, right?
The plug, yeah, the connector.
Format, yeah.
Yeah.
The connector.
And in the US, Tesla has been using a proprietary format, which you can probably better explain. Why is it different?
Yeah. Like you said, in Europe, to open the network, Tesla only needed to change software. In the US, they need to change software and hardware because the connector is different. So they made this adapter which combines the Magic Dock, which combines the CCS1 connector and the Tesla connector in one unit. And depending which car you use, you pull out the right connector to plug in. So that's how these first 3 sites were opened up and how they're starting to open up sites to any car. And then there's a number of car companies, not all of them yet, but a lot that signed an agreement to switch over their cars to Tesla's connector next year or in 2025. And for those customers, Tesla said they will also get access to the stations where they don't install the Magic Dock, but they will need to use an adapter on the vehicle side, basically. So the vehicles will need to carry their own adapters around. Yeah.
I'm so happy that we don't have that connector drama in the EU, because in my opinion, if I would not be in the industry, I would be really confused and worried that if I buy an EV today, it's outdated in 1, 2, 3 years, and then I can't resell it, for example, or I'm not going to be able to charge at some point. Because what we can see now in the EU is that vehicles with CHAdeMO, which used to be there, coming from Japan and China, I think, or no, it was in Japan. So, for example, Nissan Leaf,
Japanese connector.
Yeah, they have had it, and now the CHAdeMO connector is not built anymore by most operators, or maybe there's one plug at a site of 20 charge points, and some operators.
There's no adapter.
Yeah, there's no adapter to CCS2. Yeah. And some operators have also announced that they will no longer build in CHAdeMO and that all sites be there until they are replaced. So we see a phase out. And those vehicles, where will they charge? I mean, they can charge at home with Type 2. They can charge around destination chargers with Type 2. That is for AC, average current, alternative current, for slow charging. Alternating, wrong word.
Yeah.
But
but in the US, I think it's great for cable and adapter manufacturers. They will have big business over the next years because even if you have a charger that you only want to charge one car at a time, I think for a while the networks are going to put 2 cables on them.
Yeah.
And then obviously there's going to be hundreds of thousands of adapters that are going to be sold for the CCS cars to access the Tesla network.
Not a market that is not existing in the EU.
Yeah.
Connector market. Yeah.
Cool.
What else was there that was interesting? So maybe a little bit behind the scenes. You can't see that in here because that's like the really technical details. Those units are capable of 1000 volt. So the dispenser is able to do it, but the power cabinets that are going to limit the power supply, because they are still what we have seen from the V3 units. So it's still the 400 volt that will limit, for example, an Ioniq 5, which runs on 800 volt. So this side is not the preferred choice for some vehicles. Not the majority, but for some vehicles.
Yep.
But
Yep. Basically, any vehicle that is high voltage will be limited in its maximum charging speed by the voltage boosting technology that it has on board.
yeah,
Some vehicles don't have any voltage boosting technology, and some have one that is limited to 50 kilowatt, 100 kilowatt, or 150 kilowatt, depending on the model.
yeah. But I think Tesla has also seen that shift from the industry. With the new Cybertruck, they have also 800 volt support, but also have backwards compatibility because they split. You're more in the details there, but I think they split the battery pack into 2 times 400 volt. And but
Yeah.
the industry will slowly upgrade to 800 volt, and not only in the premium segment, but also in the mass segment. We expect that to happen. And I think they have prepared already the dispensers. And once they're ready with the power cabinets, they can just exchange in the back or upgrade them. And then those units will also be potentially ready to support higher voltage range.
Yeah. Yeah. If you're interested in learning more about that, we wrote an article at some point in the last year called High Voltage Low Charging, where we explain the background a little bit. And we also look at 3 different technologies that different car companies have used to boost the voltage. And one of those technologies is the split pack that Tesla went with for the Cybertruck, but also Porsche has announced they're going to use that in the Macan EV, which is upcoming from them.
Yeah. So maybe then coming to the biggest news, what we have seen on the V4 superchargers, it's actually the way how you can start a charging session. Because what we have seen originally was that you needed to download the Tesla app to start a charging session. But now they have integrated a screen, and the screen gives you some guidance. So what was interesting is first they have local language support. So the default was
nice.
in German, but then you have also the selection to choose English, which I think is nice. And the light was really bad, so excuse me that the pictures are not perfect, but the screen gives you, I need to check where I have a starting screen. I don't have. In the article, you will see also a small video about it. The first step, what you need to take is to plug in the vehicle. Then they start the handshake. So the car and the charger exchange the parameters for charging. And then before the car will actually not charge, or maybe it charges with really low energy. But then on the screen, it asks you to tap your credit card. So you can authenticate or pay a charging session with either Apple Pay, Google Pay, but also a credit card, which has NFC readability. And then it will actually start a charging session. And you will see on the little screen the current state of charge of the vehicle, the charging costs up until that point, the charging rate, so how much power goes into the car at the moment, the delivered energy, and the charging duration.
And do you have the impression that the user interface on the card reader is done by Tesla, or is it something generic from the manufacturer of the payment terminal?
It looks like a Tesla-specific implementation. The hardware we have written in the article, I need to look it up. It's a hardware that was provided by an established player, but the whole experience on the screen seems to be really Tesla-specific.
Yeah.
Because later, once you have stopped that charging session, we have also, I think, the screen here, exactly here. You get the notification about the total costs, and you can scan a QR code. And the QR code leads or redirects you to the website of Tesla, where you will also get the invoice, which you might need to do reimbursement. And what I found out after arriving back home, that you can actually also look up the invoice if you forgot to scan the QR code. with the number that you got from the booking. So based on I think it was based on the location, the last 4 digits of your credit card, and I think you needed to
okay.
check that you're a real person, not a robot. But we have linked it in the article where I published all the details, if you want to look it up.
Yeah, cool. This is very very solid implementation.
Yeah.
Because in Europe, it's very important that you get like an official invoice that shows you how much value-added tax was charged on that specific transaction, because businesses can get that reimbursed or reclaim that value-added tax. I don't think that's very important in the US, but yeah.
Yeah. One maybe
Cool.
thing, small 2 details that I noticed. To stop a charging session, there is this button on the charger, the connector itself, which you need to press, and then it will stop the charging session. And that can even be done if you are not there at the car and your car is locked. So potentially anyone could take out and stop the charging session, which might be, let's say, a little bit of trouble, because what I noticed that even the cables are longer. But for example, at this picture, this stall that I'm using would be dedicated to the car, which is actually standing in front of it. And I tried to use the cable from the other stall, but it wasn't long enough. And I could have maneuvered over a little bit further, but they are not really long. They are longer than at V3, but not long. And I didn't change because actually nobody else was charging at that time.
So if you stop the charging session by pressing the button on the connector and the car is locked, can you still take out the DC connector?
Yes, I think it simulates like an emergency stop or something like that. I'm not sure about the technical details, what is happening between the car and the charger, but the car released the cable. Small gimmick. There were 2 additional stalls. They were the cables or the groundwork was already done, but their stalls weren't there. And I think it's quite nice. They put some like protection for the cables. I think there must be cables under it because it was kind of quite fixed, and was there. It was almost the same size as the V4 Superchargers, imaginary stalls.
Nice.
Yeah. Besides credit card, there's also movement in the roaming space for Tesla. Because why is roaming important? Roaming has been sort of the go-to solution for authorization of charging sessions in Europe, at least. And roaming is not only within a network, but roaming is available between service operators and multiple charging operators, charge point operators that actually own and operate the charging stations. So there are, for example, e-mobility service providers, a company that I've been working, for example, and Janek have been working at, DCS, Digital Charging Solutions, which aggregate the access to multiple charging networks across Europe and offer it in a unified service. So that means customers get a contract with the MSP, and then they can charge at any charge point operators and get one bill in the end of the month for all the charging sessions. And that has been something we know a little
Similar
bit.
to like a fuel card, right?
Exactly, fuel cards. That is something that has been established in the legacy industry, I would say.
Yeah.
And I also talked to some guys at Tesla, and personally, I also know that people that own a Tesla as a company car, they haven't been using the Tesla charging network at all times, because it would be effortsome for them. They need to download the invoice from Tesla and then reimburse it with the company. But most of the companies provide you with a charging card when you get your company card. And the Tesla network
Where the
wasn't included in
reporting
there.
and reimbursement is automated.
Exactly.
So it basically saves you the 10 minutes it takes to navigate to a website, download a PDF, go to your travel expense system, upload it, and
Exactly.
submit.
And more importantly, also on the backside, the fleet managers need to validate, are those invoices correct? But with the fleet services, they
Right.
usually have mileage tracking. So they check if the consumption of the vehicle and the costs are, let's say, matching up.
Reasonable.
Exactly. And they don't have that if the people are uploading the invoices.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
I think Tesla has certainly probably also seen this from their data. Where are those cars charging? And they will see that those cars are not using this Tesla Supercharging network. Just last week, they announced, and they did announce one roaming integration with ChargeMap. It's a French e-mobility service provider. I think that was kind of the test bed for them, where they checked their capabilities. And now they announced that they have integrated with 2 fleet card operators. It's DKV, the one German, and the other thing is FleetCor. I'm not sure if they're Dutch, but also a fleet card operator or service provider.
Yeah. DKV is, I think, German or Austrian or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very well-known fuel card in Germany. I think, a lot of companies give their company drivers a DKV fuel card to get gas at different gas stations like BP, Shell, and have like a unified payment method.
Yeah. And I think and I expect this is only going to be the first step. So this is the first step. How can I ensure that Tesla vehicles use my supercharging network? If I put myself into the shoes of Tesla, what we have seen with the credit cards, and also that people can download the Tesla app to start a charging session with their non-Teslers. It's the other step. How can I get more utilization at my sites? Because Tesla they have a huge network across Europe, and now they have seen it's a business. And I think they will also open up for roaming in not these business fleet vehicle segments, but for other brands as well.
Yeah, for a while they treated the network just as a sales enabler for cars, but it's starting to look more and more like they're looking at this as an independent business that they're trying to turn into a profit center really for the company.
Yeah. And honestly, I think it makes sense. They have been really good in terms of pricing. So I've also talked to network operators, and I said, like, at the sites where we have Tesla next to us, we can see that the utilization growth is not keeping up with what we see at other sites. Because the ones that want to save a penny, they would probably drive to Tesla at the moment. So price competition is also getting more fierce.
Yeah, it's an interesting step, and I think Tesla is based in the Netherlands in the EU, right? It's the EU headquarter, and that's one of the biggest market for these company cars. I think even bigger than Germany. It's even more common. That's probably a problem that they heard a lot.
Yeah, in the premium segments, like I think 60% of vehicles are sold to businesses.
Yeah, as company cars. So yeah, they probably had firsthand experience from a lot of their friends and coworkers in the Netherlands saying, "Hey, you guys need to do something about this."
Yeah. I mean, it's also probably going to restrict maybe in some companies the policies, what vehicles can you get, or makes it less attractive.
Yeah,
maybe it's, I think, one of the biggest convenience aspects if you get a Tesla supercharging network. Okay, folks, I hope you enjoyed listening to our first longer episode. We almost got up to 2 hours. That wasn't the plan, but I think there were so many interesting news to share and also insights that we wanted to wrap up and also catch up because we haven't talked for a long time. We're still circling around the format, shaping it. So if you have any feedback, we highly appreciate getting that from you. So drop us a message either at hi@readelectricavenue.com, or also feel free to write us on LinkedIn. I think our profiles are both linked in the newsletter. And if you haven't, also subscribe to our newsletter on the website. And of course, also don't forget to subscribe to your favorite channel to tune in when we drop the next episode, either on Spotify, but we also plan to give some insights in YouTube, whatever you prefer most. Please subscribe and give us feedback.
Yeah. Thanks everyone for listening.
Bye.